I had always believed I had built a perfect life. Domenico was the man I had chosen with love and conviction, the devoted father of my children, the husband who never seemed to question our union. Together we formed an enviable couple, an example of that marital happiness that everyone seemed to desire. But perfection, as we know, is often just an illusion. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel. It costs you nothing, while for us, it is fundamental. In recent times, Domenico had changed. He was more silent, distant, as if a secret thought was devouring him from the inside. I tried to ask him if something was bothering him, if work was stressing him out too much, but he reassured me with a tired smile, barely touching my hand before turning away. Then, one evening, everything collapsed. After putting the kids to bed, he sat next to me on the couch. The bottle of wine on the table was half empty, and a heavy silence hung in the air. With an indecipherable expression, he let out a confession that made my blood freeze in my veins. He said he was tired of the routine, that he needed something new. He revealed to me that he had met another woman, a colleague, and with an almost disturbing calm, he asked me for permission to see her. He didn't want to leave me, he said, but he felt he needed fresh air, something to make him feel alive. I felt a wave of anger and disbelief wash over me. How could he even think of asking me something like that? I yelled at him, trying to make him understand that our marriage wasn't a game, that I wouldn't let anyone destroy what we'd built together. Domenico simply nodded slowly, as if that reaction was exactly what he expected. Then, without another word, he got up and went to sleep, leaving me alone with my heart beating furiously in my chest. Since that evening, everything has changed. He started coming home late, making unbelievable excuses about impromptu meetings and work commitments. Her appearance has become more refined, a new perfume, clothes chosen with more care, details she had never paid attention to before. When I tried to talk to him, he would slip away with vague answers, a formal smile on his lips, and I couldn't ignore the way his gaze always seemed elsewhere. Doubts have become obsessions. The little clues started to accumulate, hastily deleted messages, missed calls late at night, that glint of satisfaction in his eyes when he thought he wasn't being watched. I tried to convince myself that it was just paranoia, that my mind was looking for evidence of something that didn't exist. But instinct screamed another truth to me, a shadow that crept in at the most unthinkable moments. One evening, while Domenico was in the shower, the temptation became unbearable. I grabbed his phone, hands shaking as I unlocked it. Nothing. No traces, no suspicious messages, no hidden conversations. Everything was perfectly clean, too perfect. A bitter relief flooded me, mixed with subtle frustration. Maybe I really was imagining everything, yet that feeling of uneasiness never left me. As the weeks passed, the distance between us became an unbridgeable abyss. Even when we were in the same room, I felt there was something invisible between us, an unspoken truth that separated us. But I wasn't ready to face it yet. Then, one evening, the evidence presented itself before my eyes with disarming brutality. Domenico came home late, more than usual. I was on the sofa, a book in my hands that I pretended to read while I listened to his footsteps in the hall. He entered with his usual calm, gave me a distracted smile, and apologized for the delay, then asked to take a shower before dinner. I nodded without looking up, but my heart was pounding in my chest. As soon as he disappeared into the bathroom, I got up with a sudden impulse. I had to find something, anything. I walked over to his jacket, resting casually on the kitchen chair, and stuck my hands in the pockets. Nothing. I was about to give up when I saw a small receipt sticking out of the inside pocket. I took it out with a feverish gesture and read, an elegant restaurant, a dinner for two, the date and time of that same evening. A wave of nausea hit me as my fingers gripped the paper too tightly. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I put everything back carefully, as if nothing had been touched. But inside me, everything was falling apart. Now I couldn't deny it anymore. The truth was there, clear, tangible, and the wall separating us had never been higher. When Domenico came out of the bathroom, his image was reflected in my eyes like an enigma to be deciphered. Inside me, the storm raged, but my face remained a mask of impassive indifference. We had dinner in silence. He talked absent-mindedly about work. I nodded, letting his words slip away without really listening to them. But inside, something had changed. In the following days, I began to observe him with different eyes, attentive to every nuance in his gestures, every pause in his sentences. Every hint of a smile seemed like a code to decipher, every movement a suspicious detail. Maybe I was exaggerating, or maybe my instincts were just leading me towards a truth I didn't want to see. Eventually, rationality gave way to torment. I put aside my dignity and started following him. One evening, when he told me naturally that he would be working late, the decision became inevitable. I followed him in the car, feeling ridiculous, an improvised investigator overwhelmed by cold and implacable anger. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched him stop in front of a cafe downtown, one of those places we only frequented on special occasions. His breathing became irregular. Something inside me rebelled against the truth that was about to reveal itself. But I was now too far along to stop. Then I saw her, tall, elegant, wrapped in a black dress that seemed to have been created for her. She moved with a natural confidence, her hair tied back with studied nonchalance. When he greeted him, his smile opened brightly, and Domenico responded with a lightness that hurt me to the core. The kiss on the cheek was the condemnation I didn't want to hear. He didn't hesitate. He didn't look around. He didn't lower his gaze. Everything was fluid, natural, perfectly calibrated, as if that scene were the repetition of a script already written too many times. I watched them enter together, my heart in my mouth, my mind foggy. The security I had always had in us crumbled in an instant. The fear of having been wrong up until that moment transformed into a bitter certainty. That night, while Domenico slept next to me with the tranquility of someone who has nothing to fear, I understood that facing him straight away would have been useless. I needed to know how long he would be able to lie. So I started playing my game. Seemingly harmless questions, fleeting glances, silent waits in search of a crack in his perfect performance. But Domenico was shrewd and measured. Each response came with an eerie calm, as if he were already prepared for my every move. There was something coldly calculated in his attitude, something that scared me. And then I decided to dig deeper. Suspicions weren't enough. Evidence was needed. I began to compare his stories with the details of his days, to follow the traces he absent-mindedly left behind. But he was skilled, too skilled. Every time I felt like I was getting closer to the truth, he managed to disorient me with a gesture, a caress, a smile that seemed sincere. It was a game of mirrors, a labyrinth in which every way out dissolved into nothingness. The tension grew, but Domenico continued to play the role of the devoted husband with disarming naturalness. And me? I was trapped in an endless farce, waiting for the truth to explode, taking everything away. Sleepless nights became my routine. Every time I closed my eyes, images of the two of them together haunted me. I saw them in hidden corners of the city, accomplices, intimates, consumed by a passion that had once been mine, Every look from Domenico, every word of his took on a new, darker, more ambiguous meaning. Then one morning, while I was preparing breakfast, I observed him with different eyes. Domenico was in a good mood, humming an old song while sipping his coffee. The kiss on the forehead he gave me was the straw that broke the camel's back, a gesture that, in the eyes of anyone else, would have seemed tender, but which to me seemed full of lies. An act of pure fiction, studied, calibrated to perfection. Anger grew silently inside me. I would no longer ignore the signs. So I involved Federica. He would have followed Domenico for me. The idea of relying on her made me feel guilty, as if I was cheating on my own marriage. But the truth was that I couldn't stop anymore. I had to know, no matter what. The days passed in feverish anticipation. Every message from Federica was a blow to the heart, but for a while everything seemed fine. Domenico went to work, came home, went out with colleagues. No strangeness, no obvious signs. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I had seen deception where there was none. Then one afternoon the message arrived that shattered every illusion. The photo. Domenico, sitting at a table. In front of him, the same woman. Too close, too complicit, too intimate. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at that photo for endless minutes, unable to think, unable to accept what I had always known. When he returned home that evening, nothing in his attitude gave away the slightest suspicion. He spoke as always. He talked about his day naturally, and I, with a faint smile and a firm voice, nodded. But inside, his every word sounded false to me. His every expression seemed part of a well-acted script. The following weeks brought other confirmations. Every now and then, Federica sent me details that made me shudder. An impromptu dinner, a message received late in the evening, a whispered phone call with the belief of not being heard, a mosaic of small shadows that made up the picture of a now certain betrayal. And I, day after day, maintained the appearance. I studied his every move with precision, asked seemingly innocent questions, stared at him longer when he thought he wasn't being watched. But the truth was even darker than I imagined. And you, are you really ready to find out how far betrayal goes? Watch until the end. But he, as always, was one step ahead. The loving husband, the perfect companion, the impeccable liar, and I, stuck in a lie that I had never chosen to live. One evening, Domenico told me that he had to leave for a business trip, a 2-day out-of-town meeting. I felt a pang in my chest, sharp as a blade, but I smiled at him and wished him a safe journey, hoping he didn't see the tension in my eyes, that storm stirring inside me. As soon as the door closed behind him, my trembling fingers dialed Federica's number. With a voice reduced to a desperate whisper, I asked her to follow him, not to lose sight of him for any reason. That night, while the children slept peacefully in their rooms, unaware of the drama that was unfolding, I remained sitting in the kitchen. The dim light from the lamp cast restless shadows on the walls. The phone clutched in my hands. I waited for news that I feared and desired at the same time. I knew that whatever happened that night would change everything. Domenico had left in the afternoon, leaving me with a hasty kiss and the promise to talk to me later, words that now sounded like a joke. I watched his car drive away along the road, the roar of the engine fading along with my certainties. I felt torn between fear and the hope that everything I imagined was just the fruit of my tormented mind. But now I couldn't go back. Federica would update me step by step, and I would finally know the truth. I spent the evening tidying up the house, preparing dinner for the children, playing the part of the serene wife. But with each passing second, I felt more and more tense, as if an invisible shadow followed me wherever I went, whispering truths in my ear that I didn't want to hear. Once the kids were in bed, I sat in the kitchen again, this time with a cup of coffee clutched in my hands, the black and steaming liquid, like my thoughts. I tried to stay calm, to breathe deeply. The phone vibrated suddenly and I almost dropped it. My hands had turned to ice. A message from Federica informed me that she was following Domenico, that he had stopped at a hotel outside the city, and that she would keep me updated. I felt my breathing become short, as if the air in the room had suddenly become thin. A hotel. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it really was a business trip. Maybe he would meet colleagues there. But doubt crept into me like a subtle poison, preventing me from thinking clearly. I decided to wait, to trust Federica and her abilities. 2 hours passed with no news. I felt trapped, as if every minute was an eternity suspended in the void. I was one step away from calling her when another message finally arrived. This time it was a photo. I couldn't hold back a muffled moan. Domenico was inside the hotel lobby and was next to him that woman. They were talking, too close to be just colleagues. She was laughing at something he said, her face lit up with a knowing smile that hurt like a dagger to my heart. But that wasn't what destroyed me. It was the fact that Domenico, the man who had sworn to love me, was touching her hand with an intimate, natural gesture, as if that scene had already happened 1,000 times before. I couldn't wait any longer. I called Federica with trembling hands, my voice reduced to a strangled whisper. I asked her for an update on the situation. His response, which attempted to maintain a professional tone, but betrayed a hint of sadness, informed me that they were no longer in the lobby, but were riding the elevator together. He had seen the room number and would update me. The waiting became unbearable. I looked at the clock, the minutes ticking by slowly as the silence of the house enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. Then the phone vibrated again. Another message from Federica. Room 412. They had entered together and never left. A wave of nausea washed over me. I couldn't breathe. My every fear, every suspicion had become reality. Domenico was betraying me at that moment, while I was sitting in the kitchen, in the dark, waiting for an illusion of truth. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the image that continued to haunt me. Domenico with her, in that hotel room, their bodies searching for each other in the darkness, their lips meeting, while our marriage crumbled like sand between our fingers. I didn't know what to do, scream or cry or run out of the house and never return, but I was paralyzed, pinned to the chair, as if I had been struck by lightning. I felt the phone vibrate again, but I didn't have the strength to look at it. I couldn't bear any more tests, any more confirmations of that betrayal that was destroying me from the inside. The next morning, Domenico returned home as if nothing had happened. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, fresh and relaxed, while I was just an empty shell, with a shattered heart and a tight smile on my face. I asked him, feigning innocence, how the trip had gone. He answered me with the usual banal details, with the usual calm, without a trace of shame or guilt in his eyes. That was the hardest part, watching him, listening to him, knowing he was lying to me, knowing what he had done. The following weeks were hell. Federica sent me more photos, more evidence. He continued to meet with her, each time in different places, more and more careful to hide every trace. But I now knew everything. I had become a spectator of my own life, trapped in a cruel game in which every move was designed to hurt me even more. But Domenico never realized how much I was already one step ahead of him. And this, perhaps, was my only bitter advantage. Maybe he thought he was being clever. Maybe he thought he could keep me in the dark forever. But I was silently preparing my revenge. I would never allow him to humiliate me again, and that revenge would have tasted sweet, cold, like the cold I felt inside me every time he looked at me with those eyes that I once believed to be sincere. I continued to live that double life, playing the devoted wife while secretly gathering evidence. I hadn't decided what to do yet, but I knew I wouldn't do anything impulsive. I had to wait for the right moment. Domenico, unaware of everything, continued with his act, and the more he lied, the better I became at pretending to believe him. One day, after weeks of preparation, I decided the time had come. I organized a dinner at our house, inviting some of Domenico's friends and colleagues. That woman, his lover, was also among the guests. I wanted everything to happen in front of witnesses, so that Domenico couldn't deny what would happen. On the evening of the dinner, I wore my best dress and set a perfect table. When the guests arrived, I greeted them all with a smile, trying to stay calm despite my racing heart. The tension was palpable, but no one seemed to notice. Domenico joked with his friends, while I, with glacial calm, waited for the right moment to strike. Halfway through the evening, when everyone was relaxed and the atmosphere was peaceful, I raised a glass to make a toast. Domenico looked at me surprised, but said nothing. With a serene smile, I began to speak. I toasted my husband, the man I had loved for so many years, but added that I also wanted to thank another person present that evening, a person who had made everything very clear. Domenico blanched instantly. His lover, sitting next to an unaware colleague, also stared at me with wide eyes, only then realizing what was about to happen. With the calm of someone who has now overcome despair, I took out a small box and placed it on the table. Inside was all the evidence I had collected: photos, messages, hotel receipts. Everything Domenico had tried to hide for months was there, exposed in front of his friends and colleagues. The guests, one by one, stopped talking and looked on in horror. Domenico tried to interrupt me, to say something, but I silenced him with a decisive gesture. I told him in a calm but razor-sharp voice that that was what he had done, and that I had decided to no longer be the victim of his lies. The room fell into an awkward silence. Some tried to avoid my gaze, while others looked at Domenico with contempt. He stammered an apology, trying to deny the obvious, but it was too late. I finally felt free, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Without waiting for other words, I got up from the table, collected my things, and left the house, leaving Domenico alone with his lies and his betrayals. I didn't look back. I didn't listen to his cries of desperation. I had suffered enough, and that evening I had taken control of my life. In the following days, Domenico tried in every way to talk to me, to ask for forgiveness. But I didn't listen to him. I sold the house and moved into an apartment of my own, far from the memories that had poisoned my soul. I decided to start over, to rebuild my life without him, without the pain he had caused me. And that woman? I never saw her again. I don't know if Domenico continued the relationship with her, or if he lost her, like he lost me. But for the first time I felt free and in control of my destiny. I learned to never look back, not to let the past define me. Domenico had chosen to betray our trust, but I had chosen not to allow him to destroy me. And that choice, my choice, had made me stronger than I had ever imagined. Every now and then I still think about that evening, about my cold and calculated revenge, but not with rancor. It's just a distant memory of another me, of another life, a life that I left behind to start over, with the certainty that no one would ever play with my feelings again. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write, "I want the sequel," in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of future publications. Thank you.